Hi, this is Doug Howard, president of Growth Team Strategies, with our podcast, Selling the Dream, where we talk about different things people should be thinking about while they have their business, hopefully well before they're ready to sell their business, but as they're trying to understand what that process looks like. I'm here with my illustrious, effervescent co-host, Kathi Fleck, who is normally in Texas, but today is hailing from the Pittsburgh area. Kathi, how are you?
It's cold and windy out here. I'm not used to this Pennsylvania weather, but I'm managing. I'm good.
Well, that's good. I mean, really, everywhere in America, other than Texas, is cold and rainy compared to Texas. But I get it. But we're watching the thing swing behind your head there, so it's giving
That's
us
true. That's the outside
a
of my sister's patio.
well, and we're also joined today with one of our favorite guests, Paula Kruger from AIG Merger, who has done a lot of work in helping business owners navigate the selling of their business, understand the process. She's been a great partner to Growth Team Strategies and was actually integral in helping Kathi sell her business when she had her remodeling company. So Paula, welcome. Glad to have you back.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah. It may speak well for you or ill for us that our highest ratings come when you're on this podcast.
Wow, I'm pleased to hear that.
Yeah, so
I have to increase my fees, clearly.
Yeah, absolutely. So it either means you have much more rock star appeal than we realized, or people are really sick of Kathi and I just going back and forth telling inside jokes that the rest of America doesn't really understand. So, but in any case, we're glad to have you here today.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So one of the things we hear a lot, once we get people past the notion of, can I sell my business? And there are certain things like good financials and good business practices that I should be doing to make it more sellable, is that there's a lot of different ways that a business transition can happen, right? Sometimes it may go to the next generation, may go to the kids, or some combination. Maybe it goes to a leadership team. Maybe it goes to an outside buyer. And sometimes we have the best of plans, right? When I had my accounting practice, I had a successor lined up. He was ready to go, 10 years younger than me. We got along very well. And one day he came in and we were in Maryland and he said, yeah, I'm moving to Orlando. And I said, well, that seems like a long commute. And of course, this was back before it was easy to do work remotely. And he said, yeah, well, that's where my wife wants to be. And we're going to move to Orlando. And while I tried very hard to explain that his relationship with me should be much stronger than his relationship with his wife, which didn't go anywhere, all of a sudden, this very thought out plan that I had with a great conclusion for me was totally gone, and then we ended up bringing the business out to the open market. But one of the things I hear people talk about is this term ESOP, and they throw out the idea. And I think people maybe have a general idea of something that's employee owned. But I have to say, over my discussions with you and other folks at IAG and things like that, it's been a real learning experience for me. Most people's impression of what an ESOP is, how it can get done, when you should be looking to do it, is more myth than reality, or just not really understanding. So I thought it would be good. I know there are experts that will dig into the nuts and bolts of some of this stuff, and we, hopefully we'll be talking to some of them. But in your world, can you just give us kind of an idea, an overview of what is it? When should people start thinking about it? And what are things that maybe people generally just don't know about it?
Well, employee stock ownership plan, which is what ESOP stands for, is a tremendous option in certain circumstances for a seller to sell his company. So it should definitely be one of the options that they explore. It is a complex program. It's a government program designed to really help employees get the benefit of ownership, stock ownership. It doesn't mean that they have to buy the company, but it means that you will get an administrator, an ESOP administrator who works with the bank. They take out a loan, and then over time, the employees, after they meet certain criteria, will be able to get shares in the company. So it's a huge opportunity for employees to be given by sellers. And there's a very big advantage for sellers because they won't have to pay the capital gains that they would have to pay if they sold it to just a regular buyer.
Wow.
So there are benefits for both sides. And when sellers explore that opportunity, many realize how tremendous it is for employees. And we make sure that when we announce the plan to employees and we go through what it means for them, employees are absolutely thrilled to learn that they are going to be able to have shares in the company that they work for. So it's a huge opportunity, and it's a great thing for every seller to explore. It doesn't mean it's right for every seller, but it's definitely worth knowing about.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too. I think a lot of times when you have a succession plan, it's something that's hard to share with the employees, right? You want to keep your best employees. You don't want to scare them off. But, I've heard people say like, well, I hope to be out of here in 3 years. And it's like, well, you got a group of folks out there that want to work for 15 or 20 more years. So that doesn't sound too exciting to them, And so, when there's a direction that could potentially involve folks down the road, I think it helps you keep good talent, right?
Definitely. It's an excellent retention tool.
Yeah.
People will think twice because it's not that they can get the stock right away. They have to meet certain criteria, as I mentioned, that are part of the employee stock ownership plan. They have to work X number of hours. They have to be there X number of years, etc. And they participate based on their level of compensation. So there are quite a few criteria that you need to know about in order to be able to understand the program. And there are people who do nothing but work with companies on ESOP plans.
Okay.
So if that's something a seller is interested in knowing about, then I'm sure you would be able to send them in the direction of some experts that can help them.
Yeah, because sometimes I hear people talk about an ESOP, and what they're thinking is, I'm going to get my 8 people together and form an organization and sell them the company. And that's not really what it is at all. I mean, there's a variation of that, but if you don't go through the right steps, you just end up with another company where the seller is still subject to capital gains. The people buying don't really have the right structure. You know what I mean? It's like employees buying a company and an ESOP, like there's similarities, but they're not exactly the same thing.
Right. So it's really important to have an expert work with you to make sure that you're meeting all of the requirements in order to be eligible for the benefits that sellers get with an ESOP.
Yeah, because part of the way this thing becomes financially viable is some of the tax savings that go along with the new structure, right? The new process.
Absolutely. Depending on how much you sell your company for, it could be a significant amount of tax savings.
Yeah.
So Paula, in some cases, I think the owner could sell part of the company and still want to stay in the company. Would that person then sell more of it as they went along, or do you have an idea as to how that could work?
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Kathi. We had a situation recently where the seller was only in her 50s. She was not ready to sell the company in its entirety, but she wanted to put this program in place to begin getting some tax advantages early on. And she worked with an ESOP administrator and sold, I think in this case, it was about 40% of the company. No, I think it was a little bit more like 70% of the company, and retained 30%. And then as a result, the administrator, then works with the seller to put all of the necessary requirements in place. And then they made an announcement to the employees that the owner was staying with the company, was going to continue to run the company. But over time, all of the employees would be given some stock in the company and become joint owners with the seller.
And that is a great retention tool, as you mentioned. And I'm wondering, let's say this owner was going to stay on another 10 or 15 years. At some point, they may have wanted to hire additional people. Do you think those other new employees would also be eligible for that ownership? Or do
Yes,
they?
absolutely. Absolutely. New employees are eligible to participate, but they have to meet the requirements
Right,
first. They have to be
right.
X number of hours that they work, et cetera, which is a good thing because
Mm-hmm.
then that becomes the incentive for an employee to stay with the company.
Right, right.
And yeah, so you get you get a lot better retention with an ESOP program. There's no question about it.
So I think in that case, and I'm familiar with it, but I think in that case, the owner already had very strong employees who had been around for many years and also could take on those leadership roles. Now, in my situation, I did not have that. I had a much smaller company. I did not have somebody who could take that on, so I didn't even really consider it. But I'm thinking that this owner probably was able to work less at some point or take longer vacations or to put more people in charge of some of her responsibilities.
Well, this is not a program for a small company
Right.
like yours. You have to have a minimum of 12 to 15 employees
Okay.
to make the program viable.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not, if someone has 2 or 3 employees, employee stock ownership plan is really not an option for them.
So they had the qualified number of employees. What about volume? Do they need to have a certain sales volume or certain net profit in order to qualify as well?
Yes, because again, they have to meet certain
Mm-hmm.
thresholds. So there are uh, requirements in terms of how much revenue and in addition to how many employees.
Mm-hmm. Good, good. So
Okay.
much larger company who might have difficulty selling it to an individual because of the high selling price would probably have a much better opportunity of doing this type of ESOP to keep the employees and also avoid the tax implications and then to wean yourself out on a scheduled basis, I guess.
Well, it doesn't necessarily compete with an individual wanting to buy the company. If it's a good company, an individual may want to buy it just as much as an
Okay.
ESOP administrator. Yeah.
Okay. Good point.
Is there anything else, Paula, that kind of gives somebody an indication that an ESOP might be something they want to look at?
Well, if you have a company of that critical size, then I would say it's definitely one of the options that you should inform yourself of when you're
Mm-hmm.
considering selling your company. Uh, because again, the tax implications are really very helpful, very positive. It's an option that should be understood. It's a complicated process, so you can't just kind of listen to your neighbor. Like you were
Yeah.
saying, Doug, people have a lot of
Uh,
misimpressions about what it is. Make sure you talk to an expert before you consider it one way or the other.
and it seems like something that just, if you're of that size, you should at least familiarize yourself, even if it turns out to be something you don't want to do, or there is a
Mm-hmm.
successor, or
Yep.
when I was saying about my situation where I thought I had succession figured out, and sometimes something changes. Um, I think having at least educated yourself on what it might look like
Hmm.
is probably a pretty good thing, whether or not you end up going down that path or not.
Absolutely agree.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And so when people go down that, for them, I mean, a lot of it looks like, I mean, there's still a transaction, there's still a payout, um, and there's still the need to find somebody that's going to lead the team, right? That's going to lead the team afterwards.
Yes.
Um, so, a lot of it comes down to me is not, that it's a fundamentally different thing. It's just a structure that could benefit, well, in the immediate from a tax standpoint, but long term provide some longevity to the organization.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's right. And having a second in command, someone who can take over, is really really key as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because we're seeing this now with working with a couple of larger organizations, and one that we're working with, they're about to transition to the third generation, right?
Wow.
And you start with the first generation, and it's dad, and then it's a handful of dad's kids, 3 or 4 kids.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you get to the next generation, if people have been coming into the family business, you could have 15 or 18 people that are involved that all have the same last name or that are related.
Mm-hmm.
And even trying to figure out how to navigate that with, like, how do you pick, like, which 3 ought to have the opportunity to buy, or a method for promoting people or whatever. It seems to me, even with a family business in that regard, an ESOP structure could help, even just give some ground rules, but also recognize the fact that you still can't have 21 owners of a company, or 21 operators of a company. You know what I mean? People that are all trying to manage it together.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Doug. Because there are really strict guidelines for who gets how much in terms of stock shares.
Yeah.
So it's not that the people's relatives will feel that they were partial to one or the other. It's laid out very clearly who gets what, and so that could save a lot of discord in a family.
That's a good idea.
Well, yeah, because it becomes very subjective. And I always tell anybody, even if they're handing over their business to 2 of their kids, any decisions you make that they don't make coming from their end, you're opening yourself up to all kind of grief,
Yeah.
And we see things where, the oldest kid feels entitled. And, I tell them that really works great if you're in the royal family. And even that sometimes doesn't transition that easy, right? But there's just so many different factors that come down to, how are we going to assign roles and transition to something that's going to work? And at the end of the day, you want something that's going to continue to work, especially if you've got people you care about that are going to be counting on this to be, a viable enterprise into the future.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely right. Great point.
Right. So, Paula, where should people look for these kinds of resources? Obviously, reaching out to a company like IAG, you can kind of steer them in the right direction. I think certainly as we hear some of the things that might be things people should be thinking about, a company like Growth Team Strategies can help. But are there places people should look for just even information or, that kind of thing?
Yeah, they're advisors, their accountant, their lawyer.
Okay.
Those are people that will be able to send them to experts who can help them, because they probably have worked with those experts in the past as well.
Yeah. And I think we've probably talked about this maybe in one of our other conversations, but it's also important in relying on those folks that you make sure that they have some experience in business transition or succession planning, or what, it's like the well-intentioned attorney that may or may not be your brother-in-law that, settled the DUI this morning, he's doing a divorce this afternoon, probably shouldn't be giving you advice on ESOPs, or the accountant that says, I take your QuickBooks and I do your taxes, and I've never seen that before, but I went to a continuing ed class and they talked about it for 15 minutes. Sadly, there's a lot of that out there, right? And so to me, I feel like it's always fair game. And you don't have to be as rude as I am. I tend to ask doctors for their grades, their transcript from college. Did you graduate at the top of your class or just somewhere in the middle, or what? Which usually, just kicks off a great relationship. But in this regard, it's one of those things, you don't want somebody that's kind of playing at it. You don't want someone that's kind of, dancing around the edges. If they are, at least maybe they're a vehicle to get you to somebody that really knows what they're talking about. But the thing is, we really want to make sure that, you're
They're
talking
qualified.
Yeah, that knows what they're doing, right? So, cool. All right, Kathi, any other questions for Paula?
No, I don't think so at this point. I think we covered a good bit on just getting introduced to ESOP and how it could benefit companies of a certain size.
I agree. And your homework is going to be to figure out how the hell we're going to make this interesting without Paula for future episodes.
I'll call Paula.
Yeah. Paula, thank you so much. Every time you come on, it's a ton of fun, but I always feel like we get such great information. I think you're very generous with your time and your knowledge, and people should seek out the kind of resources that you represent as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank
Doug.
you, Paula.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Have a good
All right.
day.
You too.
Selling the dream. So, if you're thinking about what you're going to do with your business down the road, you can't start soon enough to start collecting some of this information, figuring out some of the options, doing some of the homework, and the payoff can be extraordinary, not only in terms of the money you get out of selling the business, but the satisfaction of the business continuing, providing for people that have worked for you for a long time, maybe family members and customers as well. So, selling the dream. We'll see you again sometime soon.
Thank you for listening to the Selling the Dream podcast, starring Doug, Howard, and Kathi Fleck. Both Doug and Kathi have built and sold successful businesses and hope this podcast will help other small business owners do the same. Tune in every week to hear more tips for increasing the value of your company so you get the highest return for your years of hard work when it comes time to sell or transition your business. Can't wait till next week? Check out our website for more information at www.growththemes.com.